After a fire destroyed my apartment, my mom told me, "Figure it out like everyone else." My brother laughed, and nobody offered me a couch. I started over from nothing. Years later, when their store burned through its last dollar and they came asking for money, I handed their words right back. By the next morning, someone was knocking at my door. "My name is Jonah. I'm 31, and I lost everything in a fire on a Tuesday night and called my mother from a gas station parking lot with smoke still in my lungs. She told me to figure it out." My brother laughed. "I slept in my car for 3 weeks while my family slept in beds I used to help pay for." For years later, their store went under, and they drove to my house expecting the version of me they threw away. 2 fires. Mine was literal. Theirs was financial. Both happened on a Tuesday. Both left someone standing in a parking lot with nothing. The difference is what happened next. My fire. Tuesday, 9:47 p.m. I was in the shower when the smoke alarm went off, which meant I left my apartment in sweatpants, one shoe, and wet hair. The other shoe was next to the bed. The bed was on fire. The fire department told me later it was electrical, a fault in the wall behind the kitchen outlet, the kind of thing that sits inside the walls for years waiting for the night you happen to be home and happen to be in the shower and happen to leave your other shoe next to the bed. 42 minutes. That's how long the fire took. The fire department told me that number like it mattered, like knowing the duration would help me process the loss. It didn't. 42 minutes. I stood on the curb watching my apartment turn into smoke and noise and water from hoses that smelled like rust, and I held my phone in my hand, and the screen said 11%, and I made one call. I called my mother, Diane. She picked up on the third ring. I could hear the TV in the background, some game show, the kind of background noise that sounds like a normal evening in a house where nothing is burning. "Mom, my apartment caught fire. Everything's gone. I'm at the gas station on Ridgeway. I don't have anywhere to go." She was quiet for a few seconds. I could hear Trent in the background, my brother, laughing at something on TV. Normal laughter. Game show laughter. Then Diane said, "Jonah, you're 27 years old. Figure it out like everyone else." She said it the way you'd tell someone the grocery store closes at 9. Flat. Informational. Not cruel in her voice, but cruel in its content. The way a door closing isn't violent, but it's still closed. I heard Trent laugh again. Not at the TV this time. At me. My phone was at 8% by the time I hung up. I should tell you something about Diane before this goes further. Because she wasn't always this. When I was 12 and got suspended for fighting, the only fight I've ever been in, a kid named Danny Reeves who told the whole cafeteria my family couldn't afford the field trip, Diane drove to the school in her work uniform. Hair still pinned from the restaurant where she waitressed double shifts, and she didn't yell at me. She signed the suspension papers, drove me to Dairy Queen, bought me a Blizzard, and said, "You shouldn't have hit him. But I understand why you did." Sometimes people say the thing that finds the bruise. She ate her Blizzard with a spoon. She kept stirring in circles even when there was nothing left to stir, and she let me sit there until I stopped shaking. That was Diane. That was the woman I called at 11% battery. Somewhere between Dairy Queen and Ridgeway, she became someone who tells her son to figure it out while his life is turning to ash 6 miles away. Ray, my father, is a different kind of absence. Diane is loud about who she chooses. Ray is quiet about everyone. He's a man who communicates through proximity, not words. He shows up to things and stands near them without participating. When I was 14 and built a birdhouse for a school project, a terrible birdhouse, the kind of birdhouse no bird would enter voluntarily, Ray came out to the garage and sat on a stool and watched me sand the edges for 45 minutes. He didn't help. He didn't offer advice. He didn't say the birdhouse was good because it wasn't, and we both knew it. He just sat there with a beer on his knee and watched. When I finished, he said, "You sand like you mean it." That was it. That's the most Ray has ever said about anything I've built. He sat in the garage and watched and said 5 words, and I remember all 5 of them 20 years later because that's what happens when a quiet man speaks. Every word gets a room to itself in your memory. Ray didn't say anything on the phone the night of the fire. He didn't call. He didn't text. He was in the house when Diane said, "Figure it out." He heard it. He didn't intervene. That's Ray. Present and silent. A man who watches things happen from a stool and doesn't stand up. They're fire. I'm going to tell you about the store now. My parents owned a hardware store. Clarkson Hardware. 22 years. It was Ray's dream and Diane's project and Trent's playground. When Trent turned 23, they made him manager. No experience, no business training, no inventory knowledge. But he was Trent, which meant he was the one they trusted, the one they invested in, the one who got handed the keys. Within a year, the store was bleeding. Trent overordered seasonal inventory, buying $14,000 worth of snow equipment in a state that gets 2 inches a year. He understaffed weekends, which is when 60% of hardware revenue happens. He yelled at Greta, a 9-year employee, in front of a customer about a return policy he didn't understand because he'd never read it. Phil, who knew the plumbing aisle the way librarians know the Dewey Decimal, quit after the 3rd schedule change Trent didn't tell anyone about. Every time someone told Diane the store was struggling, she said, "Trent's learning." Trent was learning at $180,000 a lesson. But that's the store 3 years ago. Back to my fire. My fire. The first night. 11% became 8% became 3% became dead. My phone died in the gas station parking lot. I spent the first night of homelessness without a working phone, sitting in a 2011 Civic with a broken seat mechanism that only reclined to about 40 degrees, which is enough to lie down if you're willing to call 40 degrees lying down. The car was in a Walgreens parking lot because it was well lit, and I was afraid of the dark for the first time since I was 8. The car smelled like smoke because my clothes smelled like smoke because everything I was and everything I had smelled like smoke. I lay there listening to parking lot sounds. Shopping carts. Someone's car alarm 3 rows over. A dog barking from an apartment complex behind the store. I didn't sleep. Not because I wasn't tired. Because sleeping felt like agreeing to what was happening, and I wasn't ready to agree. The next morning, I walked into the Walgreens with $34 in my pocket. I bought a $19.99 car charger. $14 left. My first financial decision as a homeless person was spending 60% of my cash on a phone charger, because without a phone, I couldn't call insurance, apply for jobs, or access the $212 in my checking account. I sat in the parking lot and watched the battery icon climb, and I cried. Not quietly. The kind of crying where your whole body gets involved and you don't care who sees, because nobody is looking anyway. Their fire. Trent had a sports betting habit nobody talked about. Over the store's last 2 years, he pulled $34,000 from the business account under inventory purchases. The inventory was a sportsbook app on his phone. The purchases were parlays that never hit. He bet on football, basketball, baseball. He bet on tennis once and lost $2,200 on a second-set tiebreak in a tournament I'm not sure he could name. My parents saw the numbers getting worse. They blamed the economy. They blamed online retailers. They blamed the new Home Depot that opened 40 minutes away. They never blamed Trent because blaming Trent would mean auditing Trent, and auditing Trent would mean admitting the golden child was the one burning the store down. So they didn't. They poured gasoline on their own building and called it weather. My fire. The 3 weeks. I need to tell you about the 3 weeks because this is where the 2 fires diverge. When I burned, I was alone. When they burned, they had every advantage. Week 1. I showered at a Shell station truck stop off I-40. $12 every 3 days. The attendant was a man named Vernon who wore a faded Braves cap and had hands that looked like they'd been doing hard work since before I was born. He never asked me a question. Not one. Not, "Why are you here?" or "Are you okay?" or "What happened?" He just rang up the shower and pointed to the hallway. One morning, the showers were full. He let me use the employee bathroom. When I came out, there was a coffee on the counter. Black, in a styrofoam cup with a lid. He didn't look at me. He was wiping down the register display with a cloth that smelled like Windex. I took the coffee. I said thank you. He nodded. That was it. Vernon, a stranger making $11.50 an hour at a gas station, gave me more help than my mother, my father, and my brother combined. I think about that coffee every week. I've thought about it for 4 years. Some people hand you a styrofoam cup and don't ask why you need it. Some people have 4 bedrooms and ask you to figure it out. Week 2. The temperature dropped below 40 on a Wednesday night. I was in the Civic in the Walmart lot with a blanket I bought at Goodwill for $6 and a hoodie I found in a donation bin outside a church that smelled like someone else's laundry detergent, which was a strange comfort, someone else's warmth borrowed without asking. My breath fogged the windshield. I ran the engine for heat in 15-minute intervals because gas costs money and I had $178 in checking and an interview coming and I couldn't afford to fill the tank and eat in the same day. I ate a gas station sandwich at 11 p.m., turkey and Swiss on bread that tasted like the plastic it was wrapped in, and I sat in the car chewing and watching my breath and thinking about Diane's kitchen, which was warm, which had food, which was 6 miles away and might as well have been 6,000. Part of me wanted to drive there, ring the doorbell, stand on the porch, and let her see what figure it out looks like at 11 p.m. in November when the temperature is 38 degrees and the car heater costs gas money you don't have. Part of me wanted to keep driving past the house and onto the highway and not stop until I reached a state where nobody knew my name. And a small part of me, the one I sat with in the cold car, wanted to call her again. Not to ask for help, just to hear her pick up, just to confirm that her phone worked and she was choosing not to use it. Week 3, day 18. I got the call back from Frank Mercer's firm. The interview was in 4 days. I didn't own interview clothes. I drove to Goodwill with $22 and bought gray pants for $4, a blue button-down for $6, and shoes for $8 that were a half size too big, but close enough if I walked carefully. I tried them on in the Civic's rearview mirror, and I looked like a man trying, which I was, and which was the only thing I had going for me. Day 21. I signed the lease for Mrs. Okafor's basement. $475 first month for $175 deposit. I paid it from an insurance advance my claims adjuster expedited. His name was Paul. He called me about the claim and heard the echo of the truck stop bathroom I was calling from and asked where I was, and I told him, and he went quiet. Then he said, "I'll have the advance to you by Friday." He bent a timeline that normally takes 11 weeks and got me $950 in 3 days. I don't know what rule he broke. I don't care. Paul and Vernon and Mrs. Okafor. 3 strangers who did more in 3 weeks than my family did in 27 years of having my phone number. During those 3 weeks, my cousin Layla showed me a family group text from the night of the fire. My mother had texted Trent, "Your brother called about the fire. Don't answer if he calls you." She didn't just refuse to help. She told the family not to help. She coordinated it. The figure it out wasn't a moment of cruelty. It was a policy. She distributed it. She also told extended family I was getting a big insurance check and doing fine. She used a future insurance claim as proof I didn't need a couch. The check, when it finally came 11 weeks later, was $6,200. Barely covered a deposit and first month's rent. Diane told people I was getting a windfall while I was buying a phone charger with $14 and showering at a truck stop. Day 14 in the car. I opened Instagram. My mother had posted a family barbecue at the house. Trent grilling with tongs in one hand and a beer in the other. Ray in a lawn chair. Cousins, neighbors, paper plates. The good weather version of a family that functions. I was sleeping in a Walmart parking lot 6 miles away. Nobody invited me. Nobody texted. The caption, "Family is everything." 47 likes. I sat in my car in the Walmart parking lot and stared at that photo until the screen went dark. Family is everything. Posted while her son was washing his face in a gas station bathroom and sleeping in a Civic with a broken seat. I locked my phone and put it face down on the passenger seat, and I hit the steering wheel with my open palm hard enough that my hand was sore for 3 days. Then I sat there with a sore hand and a dark phone and the Walmart parking lot lights buzzing above me, and I said, out loud, to nobody, okay. I don't know what I was agreeing to. Something shifted from grief to something else. Not anger. Sharper. If you're still riding with me, hit subscribe and drop a comment. I need to tell you what happened when the 2 fires met. Their fire. The store's financial collapse happened in the same 6-week window as my fire's aftermath. My fire, 42 minutes to destroy, 6 weeks to process insurance and find housing. Their fire, 1 bad quarter triggered the bank's review, 6 weeks of audits, liens, and vendor lawsuits to fully die. 2 Tuesdays, 2 6-week collapses, 2 parking lots. But here's the number that matters. During those 6 weeks, I started from $34 in cash, $212 in checking, and a maxed credit card with $80 available. Total, $326. The store started from $180,000 in savings, $60,000 in available credit, and a building with equity. Over the next 3 years, my family burned through all of it. $180,000 in savings, gone. $60,000 in credit card debt, accumulated. $45,000 second mortgage on the house, taken, and spent. Net position when the store died, negative $62,000. Same period. I went from $326 to a net worth of $187,000. They went from $180,000 to negative $62,000. The gap is $249,000. They had every advantage. I had a car with a broken seat. My fire. The rebuild. 3 weeks in, I got a call back. A construction management firm. I drove to the interview in pants from Goodwill and a shirt that still held a faint smoke smell I couldn't get out no matter how many times I washed it. I sat across from a man named Frank Mercer who wore reading glasses on a chain around his neck and had a handshake that felt like a contract. He asked about the gap in my resume. I told him everything. The fire. The car. The truck stop. The $34. All of it. Not for sympathy. Because lying takes energy I didn't have. Frank looked at me over his reading glasses and said, "When can you start?" I started Monday. $52,000 a year. I cried in the truck afterward. Hit the steering wheel again. Both hands this time. Then I drove to the Walgreens where I'd slept and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Not because I needed to be there, but because I needed to remember what that parking lot felt like before I had somewhere else to go. My first stable housing was a basement room in Mrs. Okafor's house. $475 a month. She smelled like lavender soap and watched Nigerian soap operas at full volume until 11 p.m. every night. The ceiling was low enough that I had to duck near the water heater. The bed was a mattress on a box spring with sheets she provided because I didn't own sheets. It was the best sleep I'd had in a month because it wasn't a car and it wasn't a parking lot and nobody was going to knock on the window at 3 a.m. I lived there 7 months. When I left, Mrs. Okafor hugged me at the door and said, "You were no trouble at all." I had to turn around fast so she wouldn't see my face. 2 strangers showed me what my family wouldn't. Vernon with a coffee and Mrs. Okafor with a mattress. During the rebuild, I found something in a box of salvaged papers the fire department recovered. Most of it was ash. One item was intact, a birthday card from Diane. My 19th birthday. Inside she'd written, "You've always been my strong one. I never have to worry about you." I read it sitting on Mrs. Okafor's mattress at 1 a.m. with the soap operas rumbling through the floor above me. The card was a compliment when she wrote it. Reading it in a basement after 3 weeks in a car she wouldn't rescue me from, it read like a confession. She never worried about me. She categorized me as the child she could afford to lose. Strong didn't mean admired. Strong meant unattended. Strong meant, we can point our attention elsewhere, and this one will survive. And I did survive. She was right about that. She was wrong about what it cost. That same month, my cousin Layla called. She was quiet for a while before she said anything. Then she told me she almost brought me blankets during the 3 weeks. She had them in her car. She drove to the Walmart parking lot. She saw my Civic. She sat in her own car for 20 minutes, engine running, blankets on the passenger seat, close enough to see the condensation on my windows. Then she drove home. "Your mother told everyone not to help," Layla said. But that's not why I didn't. I didn't because it was easier to drive away than to carry blankets across a parking lot and admit what was happening. She was crying. I didn't know what to say. She was the first person who was honest about why they didn't help, and the honesty was worse than the excuse because at least an excuse gives you something to argue with. I told her I didn't blame her. I'm not sure that was true, but it was the thing she needed to hear, and I'd gotten very good at giving people the thing they needed. The fire taught me about money. Not theory. The physical, bodily knowledge of what it means to not have any. I saved 40% of every paycheck before touching it. Rice and eggs for 6 months. I learned to cook exactly 4 meals, and I rotated them, and I ate them standing at the counter in Mrs. Okafor's basement because I didn't own a chair. I didn't buy new clothes for a year. I drove the smoke-damaged Civic until it died at 197,000 miles in the parking lot of a Lowe's, which felt appropriate, and bought a used truck with cash from a man moving to Florida. Frank promoted me twice in 2 years. $52,000 became $78,000 at site supervisor. $78,000 became $114,000 in project management. Frank said during the second promotion, while checking his daughter's volleyball scores on his phone because he does that every hour and doesn't hide it. "You're the hardest worker I've got because you remember what it's like to have nothing. Most people forget. You won't." By year 2, $41,000 saved. By year 3, $72,000. By year 4, down payment on a condo, $87,000 in savings on top of the equity. Net worth, $187,000. Built from $34 in a Walgreens parking lot. No family loans. No couch to fall back on. No safety net except the one I built with a phone charger and a pair of Goodwill pants that still smelled like smoke. Somewhere in year 2, I met Mara. She sold flooring at a supplier I used for a job site. She had a gap tooth she never fixed because she said it gave her face editorial value, whatever that means. She paid her own way. She didn't ask about my family for 3 months because she said she could tell it wasn't a topic that came with easy answers. When I finally told her about the fire, the car, the truck stop, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Okay, so we're building from here." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "That's terrible." Just, "Here's where we are. Let's go." Their fire. While I was building, they were burning. For years of opposite trajectories. For years where I ate rice, standing at a counter, and they ate into savings sitting at a table in a house with a craft room where my bedroom used to be. Year 1 after the fire, the store's revenue dropped 22%. Trent hired his friend as assistant manager, a guy named Marco who knew less about hardware than I know about ballet. Marco quit after 3 months because Trent kept changing the schedule without telling anyone and once called him an idiot in front of a customer buying PVC pipe. 2 long-term customers complained to Diane about Trent's attitude. She said, "He's young. He'll grow into it." Year 2, Diane and Ray dipped into savings. $40,000 to cover payroll gaps. Trent signed a vendor contract with a 30% markup he didn't read because the sales rep bought him lunch. Revenue dropped another 18%. Greta finally told Diane the numbers didn't add up. She showed her the inventory reports, the missing purchase orders, the gaps where money went out and nothing came back. Diane looked at the reports, looked at Greta, and said, "Trent's handling it." Greta quit the next morning. She walked out of a store she'd worked at for 9 years because the owner chose her son's feelings over her employees' math. She was the last person in that building who could have saved it. Year 3, savings gone. All $180,000. They opened credit lines. $60,000 across 4 cards. Trent's gambling pulled another $34,000 from the business account, filed under inventory and supplier deposits, and one memorable line item labeled trade show registration. That was actually a $2,200 bet on a tennis match. They took a second mortgage, $45,000, on the house. The house where my room became a craft room. The house with 4 bedrooms that couldn't spare one for a son standing in a parking lot smelling like smoke. The store's last day was a Tuesday. The bank seized the accounts. The landlord posted the eviction notice. Trent was standing in the empty parking lot looking at the locked doors. A cousin sent me a photo. Trent wearing the same expression I wore at the gas station. Disbelief. Hands at his sides. Nowhere to go. Except Trent drove home to a house with 4 bedrooms. I drove to a Walgreens. The store's assets went to auction. Everything. Shelving units that Ray built by hand when they first opened. Power tools. Paint mixers. The key-cutting machine that had a scratch on the side from where I accidentally hit it with a cart when I was 12 and my father laughed instead of yelling, which is one of the few times I remember him laughing about something I did. The register Diane and Ray bought 22 years ago, the one with the sticky 7 key that Greta learned to work around by hitting it twice fast. Total auction value, $8,400. 22 years of a family business, of early mornings and customer relationships, and a sign that lit up on the highway, reduced to $8,400. Less than the $14,000 Trent kicked back from the supplier. The store was worth less dead than Trent stole from it alive. Someone sent me a photo of Diane standing in the parking lot watching the sign come down. 2 workers on a ladder. Diane below them. 1 person. 1 parking lot. 1 closed door. Same composition as me at the gas station 4 years ago. Different parking lot. Different fire. Same expression on a face that just realized the building behind them doesn't belong to them anymore. A week after the store closed, Greta called me. The former 9-year employee. She'd heard through a mutual friend what happened to me during the fire, the car, the 3 weeks, all of it. And she said, "You should see what your brother was doing with the books." She sent me a folder of receipts. The gambling wasn't all of it. Trent had an arrangement with a supplier. He overordered at inflated prices, and the supplier kicked back 8% to Trent's personal Venmo. $14,000 over 2 years. On top of the gambling. On top of the $6,500 per month management fee he was paying himself, double what the business plan allowed. My family's store wasn't killed by the economy. It was embezzled by the son they trusted. I put the folder in my desk drawer. I didn't know what I'd do with it. 2 weeks later, I found out. The two fires meet. A Saturday afternoon. 3 weeks after the store closed. A knock on my condo door. I was making coffee. Mara was on the couch reading something on her phone. The knock was 2 knocks. Polite. The knock of someone who rehearsed how hard to knock. I opened it. Diane and Trent. Diane was wearing a blouse I'd never seen. Something with a collar and buttons that looked pressed, which meant she dressed for this the way you dress for a meeting with someone you're trying to impress. She used to come to my apartment in sweatpants and slippers. She used to walk in without knocking. Now she was knocking and wearing a collar. That shift told me everything about what she was here to do before she opened the folder. Trent was in jeans and a hoodie, and he stood behind her the way he always stands behind her, close enough to be present, far enough to not be responsible. He had his hands in his pockets. He looked at my condo the way people look at houses they can't afford, taking inventory of someone else's life. They sat on my couch. My couch. The one I bought with money I earned at a job I got, because Frank Mercer looked at a man in Goodwill pants who smelled like smoke and saw something worth hiring. The couch cost $1,200. I saved for it for 2 months. I picked it out alone. It's the most comfortable thing I own, and my family was sitting on it asking me to save them. Diane had a folder. Inside, projections for restarting the store. Trent had talking points. They'd rehearsed. They asked for $40,000 as a family investment. They used the word investment like it changed what they were asking. It didn't. $40,000 is $40,000 whether you call it a gift, a loan, or an investment. I started from $34. I know what every number means. Diane said, "We'd do the same for you." I looked at her. She looked at the floor. She knew what she'd just said. She said it anyway. The sentence hung in the room like the smoke I used to smell in my clothes, present and impossible to ignore. I said no. The tone shifted in under a minute. Diane's voice went from asking to insisting. "After everything we've done for you." I said, "Name one thing. Specifically. With a date." She couldn't. She opened her mouth and closed it and opened it again and said, "We raised you." I said, "You raised me. And then you told me to figure it out while I was standing in a parking lot with one shoe." Trent stepped in. "You owe us, bro. Family doesn't keep score." I said, "Family doesn't let you sleep in a car." The room was quiet enough that I could hear the refrigerator cycling in the kitchen and the hum of the light above the dining table and Trent's breathing, which had gotten faster. Trent said the store failing wasn't his fault. I asked whose fault it was. He said the economy. I asked about the $34,000 in inventory purchases that never produced inventory. He went very still. The way people go still when a number they thought was hidden gets said out loud in a room with good acoustics. "That's not." He started. $34,000 over 2 years, I said. The sportsbook app. The parlays. The second set tiebreak you lost $2,200 on. "Do you want me to keep going?" Because Greta kept receipts and I have a folder. He didn't want me to keep going. Diane tried a different angle. "We're about to lose the house, Jonah. The house you grew up in. The house where my room became a craft room 3 weeks before I became homeless," I said. "That house." She flinched. I don't think she'd ever connected those two timelines. The renovation and the fire. The room she was dismantling while the apartment I lived in was about to burn. The coincidence that wasn't cruelty but sure felt like a draft of it. Diane started crying. "You're our son. How can you sit there and—" I said 6 words. "Figure it out like everyone else." Her hand went to her mouth. She recognized the sentence. Not the words. The delivery. The flat tone. The weather report casualness. She heard herself from 4 years ago coming out of my mouth in a living room she couldn't afford to sit in, and the sentence hit different when she was the one on the receiving end. I could have kept going. I had the numbers. I had the receipts. I had 4 years of parking lots and truck stops and rice dinners, and a birthday card that read like a confession. But I stopped. Because Diane was crying. And somewhere inside the crying I could hear the Dairy Queen version of her. The one who bought me a Blizzard when I was 12 and said, "I understand why you did it." And I missed that woman. I missed her the way you miss someone who moved away without leaving a forwarding address. Except she's still here, sitting on my couch, and the forwarding address is the same house she's always lived in. She just stopped sending mail to my side of it. They left. Trent didn't say goodbye. Diane stopped at the door and turned around like she was going to say something else. She didn't. She closed the door behind her. The couch still had the indent where she was sitting. I sat next to it. Not in it. Next to it. I sat there for a long time listening to my own breathing. Trent moved back into my parents' house after the store closed. Into the guest room. Because my old room is a craft room. He's 27 now, the same age I was when I called from the gas station, sleeping in a guest room that wasn't offered to me when I was that age and homeless. Priya, his girlfriend, found out about the gambling and the kickbacks. She asked him to apologize to me. He said, for what? She packed a bag the same week. Trent's lifestyle collapsed completely. No store income. No management fee. No gambling fund. No girlfriend. He's applying for retail jobs and getting callbacks from the same kind of stores he ran into the ground. I didn't sleep the night of the confrontation. Mara did. She falls asleep easily, which I'm jealous of in a way that has nothing to do with her and everything to do with what my brain does at 3 a.m. I lay in the dark and thought about the Dairy Queen blizzard and the birthday card and the gas station and the number $326 and the number $187,000 and the distance between those numbers, which is 4 years, which is also the distance between who Diane was and who she became. And I don't know if those are different women or the same woman who decided which son to keep and which son to let burn. 6:14 a.m. The morning after the confrontation. A knock on my door. I'd been awake since 4. Mara was asleep. The condo was dark and quiet except for the refrigerator humming its constant low note. I opened the door. Ray. My father. Alone. He looked like he'd driven here in the clothes he slept in, which he probably did because Ray has never been a man who plans arrivals. He just shows up when the silence gets too heavy to carry alone. He was holding something. A jacket. Not a new one. Wrinkled. Faded at the collar. I recognized it, and I didn't recognize it at the same time. The way you recognize a song you haven't heard in years, you know it before you can name it. My jacket. The one I was wearing the night of the fire. The one I left at the gas station because it smelled like smoke, and I only had one shoe, and the jacket seemed like the thing that mattered least when you're choosing what to carry and what to leave behind. Ray found it. He drove to the gas station the next morning, before dawn, before Diane woke up, before anyone knew he'd gone. The attendant had tossed it behind the dumpster with the rest of the curb debris. Ray pulled it out of a pile of wet cardboard and ash. He put it in his truck. He cleaned it. He kept it folded on the passenger seat for 4 years. Never told anyone. Never brought it to me. Never called. He held it out with both hands. His fingers were shaking. Not from cold. From the weight of holding something for 4 years that he should have delivered in person the same week he picked it up. He said, I went back for this. I should have gone back for you. He put the jacket in my hands. It smelled like detergent. Clean. No smoke. For years of smoke washed out by a man who went back for a jacket and not for his son. He turned around. He walked to his truck. He drove away. I stood in the doorway holding a jacket that used to smell like a fire and now smelled like a father's laundry detergent, and I didn't close the door for a long time. Mara came up behind me. She didn't say anything. She put her hand on my back. The jacket was light. It weighed almost nothing. It weighed 4 years. He went back for the jacket. For years. He went back for the jacket and not for me. I still don't know which part of that sentence is the apology. Would you have opened the door? Or would you have let him stand there holding a jacket that took 4 years to deliver? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe if this one stayed with you.